Hey guys, welcome to another episode of El Jefe's Chop Shop. I'm Jeff, and this week we're going to be doing something I've been looking forward to for a long time. I'm going to try and get this leyland started and maybe try and drive it to one of the other roller doors. Let's get into it. Alright, so if you haven't seen this leyland before on the channel, I bought it probably 6 months ago. I've been trying to chase it down for about a year, and then this particular truck I had to try and buy it for about 6 months as well. So it's taken quite a long time to get to this stage to actually have it in my possession and own this thing all legit. So what the plan is with this thing is to put it on my MPR Isuzu chassis and with all the driveline from the Isuzu, and then just have this cab plonked on top and driving and all that sort of stuff, so that I can have a leyland that's reliable. That'll annoy some people. So what the plan is, this thing hasn't run in about 10 or 15 years. The guy I bought it off of said it ran about 10 years ago when he drove it into his shed, and that was probably 2 years ago. So we'll see how we go. Hasn't run for 10 to 15. So we'll give this a go and hopefully we can drive it into the other shed. All right, for those wondering, this is a Leyland FG. This one in particular is a 1970 something. So they made these trucks with BMC and Austin. So BMC made them in the 50s, Austin made them in the 60s, and Leyland made them in the 70s, as far as I know. So my plan is to try and swap this wheel over and then pull this thing out of the shed just to this like footpath, and then I can actually get in the back and work on it. So this is a super strange truck. It had a 345 in it originally, apparently. I don't really know much about the stock history. And then these seats are aftermarket, and it's got the original 6-cylinder petrol in it. So I'm going to give it a go, try and get that thing fired up. We do not have keys, so that could make it a little bit tricky, but a lot of this stuff can be hot wired pretty easily. So the doors are on the back of the cab and they open up backwards. It's got weird windows so you can see your feet, and this whole front panel comes off to access the radiator and some of the engine. So I've kind of nicknamed this thing Uncle Ankles, because you can see your ankles when you're driving, and Uncle Ankles sounds good. It's kind of hard to say, but it sounds cool. So let's dig in, try and get this thing to fire up. Okay, so the first order of business is this tire is absolutely dead, so it won't even roll. So what I'm going to do is pinch one off the back. I wouldn't suggest running just one in the back, but we're only going to be moving it probably 20 meters, and worst case, one tire will do. So I'll grab one of those off the back and chuck it on the front. Hopefully it fits, I don't know yet. And then if it runs and drives and gets into the other shed, the plan is to cut it through here and then make the cab and the front half of the chassis into like a dolly with these caster wheels here, and then the rest of this can go in the bin. So I don't need any of the original chassis other than the numbers for legalities to prove that I actually own it. So pretty much just want the cab. All right, a quick hit with the rattle gun. I've got all but one off in the back. And of course the front is actually a fair bit tighter. So I've got 3 undone or 3 loose, and then 3 are still done up. So I'm gonna go grab a big breaker bar, and if that doesn't work, I do have a torque multiplier and we can hit this thing with that. All right, so I've got a 3/4 ratchet that has been welded. I've broken this before, so I'm not scared to do it again. And a big piece of thick wall tube. So I'm gonna chuck the socket on that contraption. Try and hit this back one, and then if we can get that off, I'll take the wheel off, put the wheel nuts back on for the inner wheel, and then we'll try and get these 3 off and swap this front tire over. All right, even the torque multiplier and the long bar aren't letting this budge. So I'm gonna get some fire and some WD-40 and see which one works. All right, I've sprayed some WD-40 on that last wheel nut, and I'm gonna let it sit in the corner and think about what it's done for a few minutes. I'm gonna try and attack the front with the torque multiplier, see if we can get these last 3 cracked. All right, we have success at the front. They're all cracked. Now let's try and do that last one at the back. Well, that doesn't seem to be working. So time for fire. Hands free. All right, the blowtorch has run out. Hopefully it was just enough. All right, the rattle gun's still failing me. So I'll try the torque multiplier again. And then if that doesn't work, I'll just cut the like cut a slit in it and cut through the stud and through the nut, because I'm not going to be using any of this stuff anyway. So I probably should have done that to start with, but I'll keep trying to use these tools. Time for the I wasn't asking option. Let's get the angle grinder. Alright, so I've cut most of the way through the stud and the nut. Let's try the rattle gun again. Alright, so that didn't work. Let's get back on the grinder. Alright, so I've cut most of the way through the nut. There's still a little bit holding on, and I've cut about probably 3/4 of the way through the stud. Just access isn't great. Alright, so funny story, this was supposed to be the easy part of the day. So let's hope it goes up from here, because this is painful. Got a hammer and a chisel, let's try and knock the nut off of the stud. This seems like it's basically one piece. Alright, so this wheel nut is driving a hard bargain. There's not much of it left. So the truck's back on the ground. I've got two other wheel nuts just like loosely put on so the wheel won't fall entirely off. And I'm going to try and move this forwards at the very least to get past all this scrap metal, or this metal to build stuff. So you're probably asking, why aren't I moving all of that stuff? Well, it's actually got to stay in here. That's why I'm getting the truck out. So I'll drag it forwards a little bit, hopefully get a little bit better access, and then I'll try again. If not, I did realise there's a spare on the back, so I can just put that on the front. So I'll pull it forwards, maybe just grab the spare out and chuck it on the front, because all of the rest of it can go in the bin. Alright, no one's going to believe me, but I backed it up. First go, pretty neat. So this actually fits on there. Don't do that, by the way. There's no one behind the truck, so I'm not too worried. And I've just gone off of a bolt on the bumper, so hopefully that's strong enough. Let's get in the truck, give this a whirl. Alright, truck dragged out of the shed, and I stopped before we all got all tied up here. The tools I left back there and forgot about got run over, so now I need to jack this one up, pull it out and grab that spare out, and hopefully we can swap it over. Alright, what an absolute pain that was. So can't get the back wheel off, front wheel is undone, the spare's flat and won't pump up, so unless I can get this wheel off I can't get one on the front, which is fine with me. Got to move all this steel into here at some point. I can do everything I want to do out here on the dirt if I need to. Just cut it up and weld a frame and stuff. But I'm going to try and get this thing running, and if I can get it in the shed over here, that'd be a huge bonus. But worst case, take the front wheels off, make a frame for it, dump it on the ground, and get rid of the back half of the chassis, if not all of it. So I'm going to jump inside and start looking at this engine. Alright, first things first, I'm going to get a vacuum cleaner in here and vacuum up all the spideys and the floor and stuff, just make it a little bit nicer to work in and sit in all day, and then we'll jump into this Austin engine. Alright, all vacuumed. I'd like to say I'm going to treat this thing nicely, but that's the tools I've grabbed. So this panel needs to come out on either side just for a servicing type thing, and then hopefully get the camera in there and make it a little bit easier. And I'm also going to take off the front panel here, which lets me get to the radiator and stuff, and maybe the front of the crank, which is what I'm hoping to do. And then the top of the trans tunnel is over there. So take those three panels off and then we'll dig in. Alright, so we've got you set up here on the top of the steering wheel. So I'm going to take this air filter off and get to access to the top of the carby, and then we'll see what else lies underneath there. The inside of the carby actually looks really clean, and the inside of the oil bath filter actually looks pretty good too. I'm not sure how the base of this comes off. It looks like it's just attached to the rocker cover, so I'll try and take that off and then get it out of the way. Then we can get to the dizzy and the plugs and all that, and then just off screen down there is the coil. So hopefully if we get that off, get access to them, we can try and see what we've got. So next up I'll take the choke off and the throttle cable off. That's still attached to the foot pedal, so I'll get those out of the way, just make my life a little bit easier. And then I may as well rip off this rocker cover because there's only one more bolt holding it on. If it's not sealed, I'll pull it off and see what's going on under there, make sure it's all there. And if it is glued on, I will ignore it and put these 2 bolts back in. Everything on this engine so far is actually quite loose and well kept, so nothing's rusted shut, so I'm actually pretty confident. Alright, it's nice and loose, we just got that heater hose in the way up there. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. Also, it's rocker, not rocket, you dingbat. So that has a nice cork gasket on it, and it's actually looks reasonably fresh, but it's quite hard. So just have a quick look in here. Everything looks like it's in place. It all looks pretty good. There's actually oil up in the head, so it must not have been too long ago that it ran, or it's been sitting there for 20 years. We'll see. So I'm pretty happy with all of that. The carby looks nice and clean, so I'm pretty happy with that. I need to rip that fuel line off and go to a fresh fuel source, which will just be a jerry can or similar on the floor. So I'll take that off now, and then I guess we'll look into the spark and all that sort of stuff, and just make sure it's all nice and clean and all there. And then I'll try and turn this engine over and see if we can get any life. Okay, so just next to my knee here is the coil, so I don't really have a way of testing that. I know you can chuck a multimeter on them, but I'm not too concerned. I'm going to pop the cap off this Dizzy and just make sure that the points all look nice and everything's all good. And then the starter motor is just down there, which you might be able to see. So if I have a good Dizzy and the leads all look reasonable, which they do, I'll try and turn this thing over by hand, and then we'll see how much further we can get with getting this thing to run. Alright, it all looks pretty neat in there. Obviously I can't check for spark at this point, but later down the track I'll be able to test that pretty easily. So it all looks nice and neat. I'll chuck this back on and we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, so the next thing is the leads. This one has come off, so that's a bad start. I'm just going to give these all a bit of a crimp and tighten them up a little bit, just so they don't fall off again. They're actually quite a strange lead. They thread into the top of the distributor. So this unthreads, which is quite weird. And then it's just an exposed piece of wire that sits on top of the contact in the distributor. Alright, so the rocker gear all looks good. The carby looks nice and neat. The fuel line's ready to have a new one put on because that's all crusty. I've disconnected the accelerator from the foot pedal, and the spark plug leads and the Dizzy all look good. So now I'm going to try and turn the engine over at the front by the crank, and we'll see how much further we can get with that. If that turns over nicely, I will try and put the power to it and try the starter. Alright, so I'm going to jump around the front of the truck and I'm going to try and turn this thing over with a shifter. So it's pretty awkward to get in there, but if you can see that fan moving, then the engine is moving. So I'm going to try and do that, and you can tell me if it's moving. Alright, turns out my shifter selection is not as good as I thought, and I don't have anything big enough. So I'm going to try a socket, but I don't like my chances there either. Easy. Alright, hopefully you can see that from the inside, but this thing turns over really easily. So it's a 42mm socket on the front of the crank, small extension, bend the crank start brace out the way. I'm never going to use that, and neither should you. 42mm. I've never used that socket and I don't know why I have it. I'm glad I did. Alright, so I'm going to take a bit of a step back here. I'm going to pull each plug out individually, just make sure they look pretty good, and spray a bit of penetrant down there just so there's a little bit of lube in there before I do anything. And then once I've done that, I will pull the wiring off and just check the starter motor, and then I'll redo the wiring and try and start it. Alright, so that's 3 checked. I'm going to do the rest off camera because the camera's in the way. If there's anything that stands out, I'll show you. If not, we'll be back in a second. Alright, so I've just done 5 of the plugs. I'm just doing the front one now. I've just pulled it out and it looks brand new. So they were pretty clean, but this one is seemingly brand new. So it was either running on 5 cylinders or someone put a new plug in it. I guess we'll find out. Alright, so that's all the spark plugs checked, and I've chucked a little bit of lube in each cylinder, so that's all plugged in again. Next thing is the starter, so I need to make sure it actually cranks over. So this coil's kind of in the way, so I'm going to undo these 2 bolts, get that guy out of the way, and then get down there in the starter. I can see the main battery cable on the back of the starter, but I can't see like the trigger wire, so I'm going to have a bit of a better look. But I need to get this coil out of the way first. Alright, so I've got all the wires out of the way, I've got down to the starter. I've got the main power just there, dangling, and I can't find the actual trigger wire. There seems to be one wire off of the starter motor on the bottom, it's over this side. So I think that must be the trigger wire because there's not much else floating around. So I'm going to chuck the camera down there and hopefully film the bottom of the starter motor, and then if that's the trigger wire, we should be able to try this pretty soon. I've already got a battery on charge, and I've got the coil jerry-rigged up to that. So it'll be pretty much ready to fire. Alright, so we've just got the starter solenoid off. Dale is here, so we think that was a starter solenoid. So we reckon if we go straight from the starter to the battery, something should happen. Oh, there we go, it's cranking over. That battery must be pretty flat, because that turns over really easy by hand. So we need another battery. So we've got a new battery, we'll just try and turn this over again, just to see if it's got a little bit more life. It's not horrible, but that battery's pretty dead too by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
We need more juice.
Let's get all the batteries.
All of the batteries. There's a row of them down there.
Ready?
Alright, double battery. Let's try again. That's really not much better.
That's as good as your starter is apparently.
So that's either a good starter or the batteries are just crap. So should we try more batteries or different batteries, or should we just try and put some fuel in it?
Fuel.
Let's see how we go. Alright, Dale brought a can of Start to Your Friend. That's the most Australian product I've ever seen. So we're going to try and spray a little bit in the carby and then turn it over and see what happens.
And you need to accelerator.
And accelerator, which I need more hands, but you got it?
No, yeah.
It's just such low compression, or high compression. So between us we forgot the coil power, so that's not going to help. Not that I think we're going to have enough juice to actually turn it over, but we'll connect the coil power and try again. That tastes bad. I think we need a different battery. Things are escalating. Alright, so Dale's going to try and touch the terminals together, and then hopefully we'll get some kind of better starting.
Ready?
Give it a go, yeah. That's much better.
Open the accelerator so it goes in. Ready?
Yep. That's so crunchy.
You tell me when you're ready.
Yeah, I got one ear blocked.
Ready?
Go on. It kind of ran.
It's gonna.
Go again. Yep. That's running.
Put a jerry can on that, that's gonna go.
I reckon we're pretty close. My ears hurt so bad and I have unburnt fuel on my phone. Alright, so we need to find some fuel line and then run it into the jerry can, which has this much fuel in it, so that'll be interesting. And then I want to try and move the Isuzu because we think it's going to get in the way if this does actually work. And I need to try and get it in that shed just there. So there's going to be a bit of back and forwards, but we'll see if we can make it run long enough to actually drive it. Okay, so we're going to try and test drive this thing. I'm on the driver's side and going to have control of the steering wheel and hopefully the accelerator. And Dale's just hooking up the coil, and then he's going to chuck the starter on, and then he's going to monitor the fuel by spraying Starty Bastard into the carby. So hopefully all of that goes really well when we start moving. You forgot.
Yeah.
You forgot.
I was just enjoying the sound of this pure beast.
345, mate, it's a big block.
You need to.
I'm going to get earmuffs because, not that I'm scared, it just hurts.
It's because you're scared. Again?
Mm-hmm. It didn't work well, but we did move. Let's try again. I'm always with you when I'm doing this dumb stuff.
Yeah, it's the best time.
I'm going to blame you though.
It's how we learn things. Ready?
Yeah. You're scared, aren't you? Almost.
They should make a start, you bastard, and run, you bastard.
We're going to have to stop over there anyway and try reverse, which I don't know where reverse is, so that'll be fun. Go and do, oh.
I didn't expect to stop.
Fair enough.
Oh no, used too much.
That definitely was.
More RPMs.
Yeah. It's such a workout. Alright, my phone died, so we've swapped to Dale's phone and we're going to try this again. We've hooked the accelerator up and we can put it in reverse and we'll see how we go. Just crank it for a little bit. Water in the radiator? I don't care. I mean, I don't know. There's no brakes. I got bad news. It's running alright.
I'm gonna run out and start, you bastard, soon. Good. Very good.
Rolling it up. That is. Alright, we made it in the shed. Sorry we didn't get external shots, but we made it in the shed. Alright, so we've moved the truck into the shed. Now we're going to move the back end across because the back wheels were going to hit the post. So we've just chucked a jack under the diff. We're going to try and shimmy it across a little bit and hopefully get this thing reasonably straight in the shed, and then we can start working on it and cut it up. Alright, back on my phone. Now that the truck is in the shed, I need to cut the chassis up and move the back half out. And I'm going to just be left with the cab. And then I'm going to make a bit of a roller frame for this thing to just rest on. So I think what I'm going to do is cut the chassis here somewhere and use the front half of the chassis for the casters. And then drop the rest of it out. So drop the leaf springs, the I-beam, the steering, engine, gearbox, all of the front stuff. And just be left with a cab with some little dolly wheels on it, and all of this stuff will be pretty much removed, and I'll just keep what I need for the build. Alright, so I've started cutting this thing in half. I've undone the tail shaft, moved the battery bracket out of the way, some canister thing that's out of the way, brake lines are all gone, power's all gone, and then this side is the same, so everything's all clear. So I should be good to cut about here and similar on the other side. What I'm going to do with the chassis rails, which is probably a little bit questionable, is cut the bottom of the rail first on both sides, then set up jack stands a bit lower than the chassis, and then start cutting from the bottom up, and that'll allow the cab to sag onto the jack stands, and hopefully the rest will just sort of be at the wayside. So let's try that. Actually dropped onto the jack stands really nicely. Done. Well, that escalated quickly. The back half kind of fell off and is out there. And Dale's fighting with the dog. So chassis cut off. Now I'm going to start working on pulling the engine and stuff out, and then I'll trim this some more and then put some wheels and stuff on the back. Need to get this I-beam out and the leaf springs, and then engine gearbox, and we should be all good to go. This is currently about 270 mil off the ground. So this front corner here is 270, and I wanted about 150, so it'll be a whole lot lower. All right, got the back all cleaned up, so everything's disconnected behind the chassis itself. I do want to strip all the rails and everything, but I'll do that later. So I'm going to go around the front and start working up there and try and get this engine out, I guess. Need to take the radiator out, all the lines, the wiring, pedals. There's a bunch of stuff, so we'll just keep taking stuff off and see where we get to. All right, update number 2. Radiator's out, got all the wiring all out, a few crossbars out the way, so probably try and remove this brace here if I can, and give myself some nice access with the engine crane to try and get this engine out. So that's where I'm at, that's what I'm trying to do, is get this engine out. So probably going to jump on the inside next and tackle it from the top. So then there'll be the back, the top, and the front. And then I don't really want to get under it if I can avoid it, so we'll see how we go. All right, so I got the engine to a point where I could probably pull it out, and then realized that I'm gonna have to store it somewhere, so I may as well just leave it in there. So I've been working on the axle and the leaf springs, and then I'm gonna put casters on the cab, leave the engine gearbox in there, and then just push the cab wherever I need it to be. All right, so it's day 2 on the Leyland. Just gonna finish off this rolling dolly and hopefully get it movable today. But before I do that, just want to talk about yesterday. So we got it running, got it driving, neither of them very well. And we did actually drive it from almost from the shed. We had to drag it out. into the backyard and then into the shed. And we reversed back and came back in. It was a bit of a mission, but we got it done. So that was its first drive in probably 10 to 15 years and its last drive ever. A little bit of a cool story, but a little bit of a sad story because it's the end of its life in that form. So I'll show you where we got to last night and then I'll start working for the day. So I had a few mates over yesterday, so I did miss a few things to film. So I made this crossbar, just welded it to the chassis rails and welded some casters onto the bottom of it. So I just need to trim these ends of the chassis off, and then I need to make something similar for the front. But that's pretty much that. Nothing fancy. And then I've pulled out a bunch of the engine wiring and the chassis wiring and just all the stuff I don't need. I'm going to leave the engine and gearbox in there until a later date. So I'm just going to take everything I can off that is like little stuff that's going to be in the way. So little wires and hoses and brake lines and all that stuff can all go. Don't need any of that. So basically anything I don't need for the rest of the build can go away. And then the engine and gearbox I'll keep for the engine numbers. And then this last piece of chassis I'm going to keep for ideally chassis numbers, but I haven't found them yet. So they may still be on the other half. We'll work that out. So what I want to do this morning is get a bar across the front here with some wheels on it and try and get this whole thing sitting on casters. And then I want to try and get the brake drums, the I-beam and the leaf springs all out and just get this thing as stripped as it can be and then get it ready to go back into storage. Alright, so I've cut the leaf springs out. The front axle is gone. It's over there. So now I'm just making a front caster wheel bar for the front. So that's over there. I've cut those pieces to length. So it's going to be a little bit different to the back one. So I'm going to come off the bottom bar and come up at 90 degrees and then weld it to the side of the chassis. Because it's a bit awkward in here. So I'm just going to go up there where the jack stand is, just a pole coming down, and then the bar across with the two wheels on it. So it's going to be a bit tricky to get it all in place, but once it's all together it should be pretty sweet. And I'll just weld it to the chassis, and then this thing should be a roller. Alright, I'm trying to hurry through this last little bit. I've got these two bars welded up together, and then got these wheels welded on there, and a little spike on the bottom. So when I flip this up the other way around, the chassis rails land just inside either one of those two posts, and then I'll weld that directly to the chassis rail under the front of the car. So what I'm going to do now is chuck that under there, clamp it all in place, give that a good old weld, and then get this truck off of the jack stands, and then I'll show you when I'm done. Alright, casters are on, and clearly they work because I managed to spin this thing around. So I've just tucked it out of the way for now as much as I can. It's not great, but it's good enough. So I need to clean all the floor and everything, but I'm going to go do something else. So that's probably it. Alright, so that's it for this week's episode on the Leyland. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoyed getting it running. Hopefully you enjoyed cutting it up. I know a lot of people won't, but that's what I'm here for. It's called a chop shop for a reason. I cut things in half all the time. So thanks for watching. See you next week.